Hey guys, Coach Logan here again. This time I wanted to record another puzzle solving video. I think that puzzles are a really good way for kids and adults to get stronger, so let's get to it. So I'm in ChessKid here. Let's go. These puzzles are really hard. I've got my rating to a point where the puzzles are really stretching my mind. Okay, so rook to b8. What's going on in this position? So here, white is up in material, but and has a dangerous pawn on g6 and active rooks, but our queen is pinned, so we're about to lose material. However, their queen is defending the rook, so if there was some way to decoy that queen, maybe there's something there. So for instance, I'm thinking about g takes f7 check, just because it's check, honestly, and if the queen were to take, then we could take on b8. If the king were to take, we would have discovered checks like rook to b5 with check on the king and a hit on the rook. So they'd have to play something like king to h8 or king to g7. If king to h8, well, our queen would still be pinned there, wouldn't she? I'm also thinking about g takes h7, maybe because that's even more forcing than g takes f7, because there we're threatening the queen on h8, so they'd have to play king to h8, and the question is, can we do something there? Wait, I'm starting to see something. Okay, so g takes h7 check, king to h8. Then I think we have this move rook to g5 with the threat of rook to g8, and they can take our queen there, but after c takes b3, then I don't see a check for them, and we're threatening rook to g8, which wins, and if bishop g7, we can just sack. Okay, I see it now. That's very clever. That's a nice problem. I think rook to g5 wins here. Okay, so they have, here we can play. I was thinking if they took our queen first. Here they're playing bishop g7 first, so now I think we want to take the bishop, king takes. We're threatening the queen on h8. Unfortunately, their rook is still covering that, but I think they're, okay, I see it now. I think here we can take this. King takes. Now I think we promote rook takes, and then we have queen back to b2 check. They can play f6, but we take the rook and then take the pawn on f6, and that should be all she wrote there. So that looks good. Okay. That one wasn't too bad. I'm just going to have a sip of water. Okay, here. Let's do another one. Okay, so what's going on here? So the first thing I noticed, okay, so we're down in material. We're down a full rook here. But I noticed their king is kind of in a kill zone. We have our bishops just shooting down these diagonals. Our rook has veiled threats on the d file. There's a lot of mating ideas that come to mind with like a knight popping into c2 or this bishop moving out of the way. So I definitely think this is a checkmating problem. So how do we use our 4 minor pieces or our 3 minor pieces and our rook to mate them? Well, the first obvious move that comes to mind is bishop takes c3 check, which forces bishop to d2, at which point even bishop takes d2 there looks pretty good. That actually just seems to be winning, so I'm not sure what I'm missing there. At that point, I mean, it even seems like we could just take on d2, and then after king d1, take on c1, and it appears we're ahead in material, so I'm not actually even sure what there is to this problem. I am wondering why this is a problem with this level. I'm just trying to see if I'm missing anything. Bishop takes c3 check. Only way out of check I see is bishop to d2, and then bishop takes d2 check. King has to go to d1. At that point, we have two minor pieces for the rook, and we can also play, I mean, we could play bishop takes c1, but I mean, I think we could play bishop back to c3, and I don't see where their king goes. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really understand why this is, what even the difficulty is here. Our bishop on a6 is freezing the king. I mean, again, bishop to c1, I think king takes, and then rook takes, so we're up two minor pieces that should be winning, but I think bishop c3 is just checkmate. Right? I mean, this bishop is covering, yeah, I think this is just checkmate. I don't understand that problem. That seems like a much easier problem than this level, so I don't know. But I can't attest to that. I can't really account for them doing that. Okay, so now what's going on in this one? This is another one. We're down a pawn, but we have very active rooks. We've got a pin along the second rank, so I'm definitely considering stuff tied to knight takes e3. In this case, the queen could take, so we can't just do that right away. Or at least it's not obvious we can. Something like d4 is quite interesting, with the idea of just better controlling the e3 square. Like d4, we're threatening to take on e3. If the pawn moves to like e4, then we would have knight e3 check, and this time it's defended by the pawn, so the queen can't take. If the pawn were to capture on d4, there we could play knight takes d4. We're attacking the knight on f3, and if the knight takes us on d4, we would have rook takes f2 check, which is very strong, should be winning. I think I like this d4 idea. I mean, you could play rook takes f5, but then after queen takes f5, it does seem we're picking up an exchange, and they can't play knight takes d4 because of rook takes f2, so they'd have to play e takes d4. So even though they'd have two pawns for the exchange, their structure would be compromised. I think I like d4. I feel like maybe it's hasty for me to play it after only that amount of analysis, but I can't see a problem with it. All right, well, apparently there was a problem with it. d4 was not the right answer. Ooh, rook to b1. So they just want to decoy the queen from e3. Ah, that's nice. Okay, that's definitely better than my answer. So just to explain this. So basically, my instinct that e3 was an important point of conquest was correct, but there was a better way to go after it than d4. The best way is to decoy the queen, and the point is after queen takes b1. Now we can take on e3. They can't play king to h3 because of, I think, queen e6 check, and then if king h4, we have queen g4 mate. Same if they play g4. So after knight takes e3, they've got to move their king to g3. And now after queen takes f3, the threat of queen g2 is just overwhelming. They don't have any useful checks, and we're just coming in on g2. Okay, I should have solved that. I should have been more patient. Let's do another one, though. Okay, what's going on here? So black is up two minor pieces, but we have an attack. G6 is hanging. But I mean, we need to make sure their king is in a kill zone if we're going to try to turn this into a mating problem. Okay, so So, for instance, what I mean by a kill zone is at least I'm not immediately crazy about something like queen takes g6 check, because after king to g8, say queen to h7, then they play king f7, and it seems, at least to me, like their king might be making a run for the hills there. Queen g6, king g8, queen h7 check, king to f7, say like bishop g6 check, king to e7. You could try queen h4, trying to trap the king that way, but they have, bishop f6, or even queen f6 looks playable, so I'm not seeing how that traps the king. Excuse me. Long day. Now, something like bishop takes g6 is possible, forcing king to g8, and then there we could try something like queen h4, which threatens queen h7 checkmate. But I mean, they have resources to block that. They could play bishop h6. They could try queen f6 even, which attacks our queen and clears the f8 square for their king to run to. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not seeing that as necessarily winning either. Another possibility, now that I look at this, is trying to include the rook in this. So at some point in f takes g3, with the idea of this rook coming to f1 in some of these lines. So the question then would be, what's the best way to try to bring that about? Say queen takes g6 check, king to g8, queen h7 check, king to f8, or king to f7, and then f takes g3. Then we're threatening rook to f1 check, which would be quite powerful. There, could they play king e7? Possibly. But maybe even rook f1 might still be strong, hitting the queen. They're not able to play bishop f6 because our queen is pinning the bishop to the king. If they try queen to g8, then maybe queen h4 is super powerful. So maybe they can play queen h8, which seems a little bit annoying. But I feel like we're getting closer now with this idea of including the rook. So queen takes g6 check. Maybe after king g8, maybe then play f takes g3, and the threat is just to play either rook f1 or queen to h7 check and then rook f1. I think that's it. I think we want to play queen takes g6 check, and now, I mean, I'm going to double check here, but I think I like f takes g3 now, and the point is just that rook f1 is coming, and the inclusion of the rook on the f-file is deadly for this king's plans to escape. I'm just looking for anything they can do there. Can they try rook to e7, trying to bring the rook to defend? Then I think we could play rook f1. And the point really is, if they block on f7, then queen h7 is mate. So I think I like f takes g3 here. Okay, so like here, I think we want... do I want queen h7 now? Queen h7, king f8, rook f1. They do have bishop f6, which maybe I should have seen before I went for this line. So queen h7 check, king f8, rook f1, bishop f6. But there we have rook takes f6, and then we bring the other rook to f1. Yeah, this looks correct. Okay, so this would fall under the category of include every piece in the attack. And on that note, I am going to wrap up, as we're almost at time for this video. So I will see you guys next video.